Our first speaker this afternoon is an Italian architect and designer based in Zurich. He's the founder of Conceptual Devices, an interdisciplinary, design practice with the mission to develop design strategies with social and economic impacts. He's currently teaching at ZHdK Zurich, and he's the author of ELIOOO, How to Go to IKEA and Build a Device to Grow Food in Your Apartment. He has also been commissioned by the Italian government to contribute to the presence of Italy at the Architectural Biennale in Venice in 2018, and he has worked on topics like food security, waste reduction, innovative dwelling systems, optimization of renewable resources, and our relation with built environment. Please welcome Antonio Scarponi.
Knowledge, narratives, and devices. The future of how to make yourself at home. This is what I'm going to talk to you about. But I think before I do this, we need to frame two main questions. The first question is, what is the future? Now, take this image as an allegory. Last summer, a friend of mine gave to my daughter one of these new kind of Polaroid camera called the Instamax. I think they're produced by Fiji. And she wanted absolutely to take a selfie with my father and myself. And so if you take this picture as an allegory, what I found striking is that in 1935, when my father was born, the world population was about 2 billion. When I was born in 1974, the world population was 3.9 billion. One generation, the world population doubled. When my daughter was born in 2009, the world population was 6.8 billion. And now, in 2017, it's 7.5. Since 1974, the urban population grew from 38% to 53%. Now, what is the future is going to be like? We know this is a fact. In the next 35 years, the world population will shift. So imagine my daughter taking my place. It's a generation shift, right? The world population will shift from 7.5 to 9.8 billion. And the urban population will grow from 73% to 63%. Now, if you do all the math, it will mean that in one generation, the generation of my daughter, and hopefully myself too, we'll need to find a way to make ourselves at home of the same amount of people who live in the entire world in 1935, which is about 2.19 billion people. Now, the question, here comes the second question. The question is, what is home? And I think we designers are kind of making a double dance, or we could think ourselves as a kind of like a salmons, consider like the fish. On the one hand, we are stepping all the way down and investigating the future in terms of technology and investigating the implication of technology. And on the other hand, in doing so, at the same time, we need to understand the true meaning of a human existence. And so the more we advance, and paradoxically, the more we need to go back and really understanding what human existence is about. So speaking of home and what is a home, I think we can break it down to 5 biological laws in which, independently from income, health, or culture, we all need to face. So I call it the SLO to make it a little bit more fancy. Eat, no matter how humble your eat and food preparation, no matter how humble your meal is. Sex, no matter how romantic or intimate your sex is. Sleep, no matter how comfortable or how many sweet dreams you have. Excrete, taking care of our bodies, no matter how salubrious that is. And obviously work, which allows us to be human beings and actually to live, technically. So you can take it down, this function, into a rhythm. I create this diagram in which they create our everyday life, give it ourselves a rhythm. And if you think about it, the concept of dwelling, did not change much in the last 10,000 years. You know, we still have sex the same way we used to have it. We eat the same way, right? The question is how? How are we going to make, in one generation, build a home for the same amount of people who live, an urban home, by the way, of the same amount of people who live in 1935, at the time where, for instance, my father was born. I propose that this how is a form of knowledge, which I call design. This knowledge creates narratives, and narratives get concretized in what I call a device, a form of a concrete artifact that reconnect narratives and a wider knowledge. So let's take a step back for a second, and let's look quickly at what I consider, but hopefully not only myself, two of the main hows that changed forever the history of humanity, at least the relationship between the environment and the human population. The first how is agriculture. We stop to be nomadic. We grow our food. We have control of our resources that we produce. That's the beginning of agriculture, of architecture. That's the beginning of many arts. We needed to store food, to hide it, and we created a device which we called architectural, a roof on top of ourselves and a floor underneath. Then, from the rest of history of humanity, the world population was more or less stable. Roman Empire, Middle Ages, Renaissance, you name it. More or less the balance between the economy, between life and death, was kind of defined. And by the way, this is what the demographers, technically speaking, I think I need to be kind of a little bit precise when I talk about these things, a little more precise. They call it the first demographic transition. So you have what I define an endemic condition, then there is a shift, first shift, agriculture, and then there is a second shift. An Hungarian doctor called Ignaz Semmelweis discovered that hand disinfection in obstetrical clinics can reduce the possibility to diffuse puerperal fever, and therefore allowing the possibility to increase decrease the mortality of a mother giving birth, and decreasing the infant mortality. Imagine a small device, 3 words: wash your hands. How simple as that? Changed completely the history of humanity. The balance between life and death was broken, and the world population started to grow. This was about middle of 18th century. And since then, every generation, the world population doubled. And this is what the demographer called the second demographic transition. And in my opinion, it's something never seen before in the history of humanity. Our time is an incredible time in which we witness this passage. And if you want to speculate about it, what is also interesting is that the first transition takes ages, and this transition, from a human point of view, takes no time. So now, based on this introduction that I just made, I would like to introduce 10 theses about the future of how to make ourselves at home. I will use some project of mine, some hands-on, first-hand research project, which allows me to define 10 theses, which I think is important for the topic of our discussion here today. Thesis number 1, be political. In 2001, I was fascinated by the internet as infrastructure, and most of the geographer at the time was looking at the networks, and I was interested in how many people is actually connected to the internet. And I did a cartogram, what technically speaking, or an infograph, if you like, inventing a sort of like a digital scale. So 1 pixel represents 1,000 people. And I hacked the work of Alighiero Boetti, famous arte povera artist. And you can see the amount of people connected by enlarging proportionally the country. And the blue is the people not connected. But what fascinates me is you have an infrastructure that turns people producer and consumer of information. And what is really interesting at the time was that from 1993, the moment in which the internet was publicly released, to 2001, 2002, when I did this first map, the internet population doubled every year. So I thought to myself, what if the whole world population would be connected? And this would allow me to introduce a new perspective, a new representation of the world, which implies a different idea of the world, right? And so I started to plot a political and cultural map, atlas, in which cultural and political information are displayed on population basis. Now, this is a map of the amount of people who lives in country where the death penalty is enforced. And this is the amount of people living in countries which are considered by the United Nations, an office of the United Nations, democratic. And this is the amount of people who are living in countries who are represented by a female head of state. Now, you can question, what is democracy? I mean, is it a gender thing? Or, you can start questioning yourself other questions, and you can also make different consideration of how many maps you can do. For instance, this is a map of a very powerful world, which is officially recognized in all these countries, which is Azadi. Azadi is a Persian world, which means freedom as a process of liberation. So I think it's important that we shift our point of view, and we look upon our world from the point of view of population. And let's be political. Thesis number 2. Tell me a story. I was invited back in 2008 to write a sci-fi story. I'm not a writer at all, and this is not my thing. But a curator asked me, he was editing a book, and could you please, as an architect and as a designer, write a sci-fi story? And what I did, I fictionized. The story was called The Last Market, and I fictionized a project that I was running, that I made in Torino, in one of the poorest flea markets of Europe. Which is the market of balloon. And this was a competition launched by Abitare. We won the competition, and the deal was that we had to collaborate with a multinational company together with the local community. There were many activities at the time. And the story that I imagined in the last market, the story that I wrote, it was a world where all the resources are finished. All the natural resources, all the economic resources, is an exhausted world. And I imagine a story in which the most valuable thing that you can buy at the market was a story. A story that you can buy or negotiate that allows you to activate the junk or the stuff which are already produced, which are already exhausted, to activate them. So I made this story, which is actually what is happening there. Broken toys, spare shoes. This is happening in Torino, not somewhere exotic, right? And when I was there was a Russian lady who was selling broken bulbs. And I asked her, to whom are you selling broken bulbs? I mean, what is the deal? And it was a big, strong lady. I was nearly intimidated by this lady. And she told me, you stupid Italian, you don't understand. You buy the broken bulbs from me, and then you go to your office and you shop and you swap it with a good one. Or you go to a bar and you just change it, right? What's the problem? And so our task as a designer was to create a sort of what we consider a kind of like an instant urbanization. We had to define in a clear way the merchant position, because there was night fights every Saturday morning. So find a system in which we can, with extremely low means, or almost no means, we could actually produce a system in which you can define a number. Then we had to create a system to support a shelter, to protect the goods and the merchant from rain and sun and so on. And most interesting, a hand truck to deliver the goods, because one of the problems was that if they do 2 moves from the car to the position, because traffic limited area, the goods were stolen, believe it or not. So a foldable truck would have helped to actually move the things. And we were assigned to IKEA. And IKEA said, yes, perfect, no, fine, technical sponsorship, no problem. For them, I mean, it was kind of like a good deal. So we did a workshop with the people of the market, and we hacked a foldable cot. I think it was about 10 euros. And together with them, with their knowledge, we used a broader system and a few others, using the bag, opened them up. And we created several of these devices which actually would allow them to at least to prototype this procedure. We started from a tile, one tile, which you then can put a pole in it. And in this pole, you can imagine to attach a system that you can protect sun and rain and the merchant. So the point here is, tell me a story of how an object exhausted, a piece of waste, can be actually activated with a story, with a piece of information. Thesis number 3, grow your food and close the door. Food, obviously, food production is one of the greatest challenges in a world of soon 10 billion people. And I start asking myself, how much food you can grow in a normal apartment? So I started to kind of making assumption. So you can assume to have a bathtub. In a bathtub, you can grow up to 2 kilos of tilapia. 2 kilos of tilapia can grow using aquaponics. Aquaponics is this system which fish and vegetable grow symbiotically because the fish nourish the plants and the plants clean the water for the fish. So 2 kilos of pilates could grow a certain amount of surface of salad, say. And so putting all this information together and how you can turn it into a sort of like a supply that looks like kind of like a Frankenstein like this one. And it turned out a project that I called Malthus in order to celebrate the scientist, the first scientist who started to question the capacity of the world to produce enough food for the whole world population. And these things produce 1 meal a day, one side dish of salad and 200 grams of fish that you can actually fry after you have been growing them and actually eat. Do people do this? No, I did it in my office as a form of theoretical speculation, and it is possible with fairly low means. But again, it's interesting to challenge the question of how much food you can grow in a home. Now, here, that I can do with almost no resources to activate some piece of knowledge, which is called aquaponics. Thesis number 4, fuck consumerism. Back in 2001, I was invited to design an exhibition at Cabaret Voltaire. You know, Cabaret Voltaire is this place of birth of the Dada movement in 1916. And the exhibition was called Revolution to Smash Global Capitalism. And my point, and you know, I'm old enough, and I told to the curator, said, fine, I mean, I'm with you, but nowadays we move to the age of protesting in the street to actually hacking the system, because it doesn't work anymore that you stay stop to something. You just do it differently. You can. So my hypothesis was that only capitalism could smash capitalism. And the brief of the exhibition was that we had to create a temporary artist in residency for dissident artist activists, and we had to have tables and couches and so on, and welcome the people and so on. So my proposal said, they said, yes, we love the idea, let's smash capitalism with capitalism. What would you do? My proposal was to go to IKEA, buy a certain number of these famous boxes, for me almost legendary, called Trofast, build the whole exhibition with these boxes, tie them with zip ties, and after the exhibition was finished, just finishing right before the customer satisfaction policy was expiring, cut the zip ties, bring everything back to IKEA and say, thank you, we don't like the color. And so we did. And with this system, we made a bookshelf, and we made lamps, and each of them with a special name, with referring to, and so on and so forth. Different models of using this system, a bed, you say here, lamp, stool. And the point here that I think it's important is the fact that all we needed was a narrative, an instruction manual of a furniture or a system that did not exist, that could activate 1 plastic boxes and make the exhibition travel for free in any city near an IKEA store, right? And make some propaganda. Thesis number 5, hack the system, not the product. Luckily, few boxes of this exhibition remained in my office because we had a big Volvo, but all the boxes would not fit into the car. And a few months later, a friend of mine invited me to an exhibition in the Milano Design Week. And he asked me to do something, as you know, we do in those events among friends. I don't go more in detail than that. And I was interested in creating a closed loop between what I eat and what I produce. So I created an hydroponic system using the boxes remained from the exhibition. Using, you know, hydroponic is this system compared to aquaponics where plants grows in water. And you put basically a sort of fertilizer in the water. And what is cool is that you use up to 90% of the water otherwise used in agriculture. And you produce more space in less food. And most important for me, you don't have to water the plants. So they do everything by themselves. So I created a system in which I thought, what if I use, instead of fish urine, I use my urine? And I did some investigation. I thought maybe I turned myself into kind of like a monster, right? A kind of like incestuous diet. And I did some investigation. I found a document from the World Health Organization, which are actually sponsoring this practice, saying that it's all fine as long as it comes from an individual, healthy individual, no drugs, no medication, and so on. And so I did. And what is interesting is that you need homeopathic doses of your own urine, few drops, smellless, colorless, I would say tasteless. And so the idea it was I create a system, different types of setups, different scales, smaller, bigger, and so on. And I thought, what if I transform people into a producer of an idea? And I make an instruction manual of an IKEA product that doesn't exist. All I need is a narrative. Imagine producing boxes in China, making a patent, funding warehouses, funding all the logistic hell. I didn't want to hack an IKEA furniture. I wanted to hack the IKEA infrastructure, right? All I needed was a narrative. Make it simple, very little few notes. Show how to, because it's playful, it's fun. We might not even want to do it, but it's actually fun to think about it, how you can activate what you already have. What is also interesting here is that I was asked myself, and a company who was producing these lights made a lamp, which is actually the complicated part of the whole system, that fit exactly my box. And they called me and I said, look, we hack you. Let's do a project together. And so we made a perpetual garden, which is able to produce all types of fruits and leaf vegetables year-round. And we presented in Milano Design Week, in the London Design Week. So hacking the IKEA infrastructure. This is the world map distribution of IKEA. A small piece of information can not only hack a piece of furniture, but can hack the whole IKEA infrastructure and transforming IKEA into a distributor of supplies of a product that does not exist. Thesis number 6, activate the city. For family reason, I always go to Athens. And every time I go to Athens, I have kind of like a rituals of mine. And I walk all the way up to the Ligapitos, which is that little hill over there. And while I'm doing so, I think of Le Corbusier, who in 1933, at the Modern Congress of Modern Architecture, arrived with 2 hours delayed to his speech. They were also discussing about the future of housing and how we're going to do it, and the Gropius, all the heroes were there. But he arrived 2 hours delayed, all sweat, all red. And with his charm, he said, he apologized, said, sorry guys, but I really had to walk on top of the Ligabeto because I wanted to see the Acropolis at the sunset when the Parthenon turns red, because that's the only moment in which the radicality of classical architecture is revealed. And obviously everyone was conquered, right? So this picture was it's from the Acropolis looking at the Ligabeto. So imagine yourself the other way around. So in my virtual talk with Corbu, I asked him, what the hell have we done? If you think of the whole landscape, all the way down to the Piraeus, is filled with Corbu-style architecture using the 5 fonts, completely messing up everything. We did bought the zoning system, we did buy the 5 points, what we screwed up anyway. So in 2011, there was the crisis in Athens, and I thought, what if we can create resiliency by producing food and activating parts of the city, like in this case, flat rooftops, which is the city is made of. There is another cities on top in Athens. So I created this greenhouse that is able to produce up to 10 kilograms a day in 25 square meters. It has a geodesic structure because it allows to redistribute the concentrated load, and technically allows to feed a whole condo, a full family of 4. And what is interesting, you can just drop it on a rooftop. This system could use aquaponics and hydroponics. Hydroponics is more efficient, more productive than hydroponics. And this is a system how a small device could actually activate and subvert the function of the city and create bottom-up form of resiliency. One of the options of this project is making the structure out of bamboo. So I was fascinated by the idea that you can farm the farm. Thesis number 7, farm the city. Again, a few years ago, an American entrepreneur, he knew my urban agricultural activities, and he called me up and engaged me for a research project. And he asked me how much food you can technically grow in a city. Meaning, what is the relationship between money to be invested and amount of goods that you can actually take out of it. So I engaged few university consultants and trying to figure out, thinking easy but doable now, here, right? The results of all this research was a concept called Farm X, which is able to produce up to 5 tons of fresh food in 1,000 square meters. Now, these are abstract numbers, but if you think with 5 tons of fresh food a day, you can feed 3,000 people of vegans, 3,000 vegans, basically. And 1,000 square meters is a medium-sized urban block of 32 meters times 32 meters, a gas station. And it's about 11 meters high. And what is interesting of this project for me is that you can use it as a device to farm the city, creating jobs, activating neighborhoods. And in this case also, the business model was that we were able to having like a living warehouse where things grow in the warehouse, and therefore distribute on demand to theoretical restaurants as soon as they need it, right? So the business model was deliver the fresh food and pick up the food waste, which you can put back into the system, digest it, create gas, and warm up the greenhouse in the wintertime. The interior landscape of this machine, because it is a machine, it was optimized for different growing techniques, optimized to match the needs of different plants at industrial scale. And considering a semi-automatized operation so that you can actually create job position in a disadvantaged area. And in this sketch shows you how this module can actually adapt to different urban plots. This is almost a provocation, if you will, but with the idea that you have 1,000 square meters and you create resiliency for 3,000 vegans. Thinking of applying agricultural technique into the city and farming the city mean that you think ephemeral. You have a structure that costs XY and could last for technically 20 years, and after 20 years you can take it down or change function and activate as long as the neighborhood is regenerated. You farm elsewhere when it's cheaper, when the land is cheaper. So you can completely can do and undo this type of architecture and rebuild it elsewhere. It's a fairly generic, one could say, or having a generic approach. These are some sketches from a concept proof that they are trying to build since a couple of years now, smaller scale. And here comes my thesis number 8, Somnia et Labora. Now, if you think European city, most of all, they change much more from the inside. They change their soul, they don't change their body, right? So you have a shopping mall turned into a church turning into a disco, and so on and so forth. So I asked myself, what if we can develop a small device that allows you to inhabit the interior spaces of the contemporary city? And we made with a Swiss company called Das Concept a portable hotel room. A portable hotel room and an office room combined. It's called Hotello. And the idea is a little bit of a micro theater in which you kind of showcase the theatricality of interior living, especially in an empty space. So we consider this device as a way that we can activate abandoned or unused spaces. We brought this project to the Design Week in Milano. We did the whole story. We took an abandoned abandoned factory, and we create an Hotello city with different functions. We hosted the headquarters of Abitare during these weeks to feature the possibility to actually dwell, sleep, somnia et labora, dwell and sleep and work in 2 square meters. In 4 square meters in this case. So with the idea of creating like an interior scenography that can change using 2 types of curtain, insulating, sound insulating, and translucent. The whole system could be dismantled and put into this trunk that can be used as a locker, imagining a co-working space, and the whole system could be taken away so that you can have an office on the go. This is number 9, off-grid yourself. I was, last Architectural Biennale, I was commissioned to design a rural pavilion for an Italian organization called Libera. Libera is an organization that activates land confiscated from the mafia in the south of Italy. They gave us a template. They hired 5 architects for 5 different organizations. I was, in my opinion, the luckiest one. Was the most interesting challenge to work with a really powerful and engaged. Not the others were less engaged, but for me, for my kind of research, was a very good match. And so I had the chance to design a form of like off-grid architecture, and an architecture that is mobile, that is producing gas, electricity, and hot water at the same time. It was a participatory model again. They need to work with trained volunteers, give legal consultancy to people who want to report illegal mafia activities. So the idea was to take a food truck, which is the one that I was given as a template, and according to the fact that we need to use more space, thanks to scaffolding system, we add another story. And in this way, the whole system could be, the scaffolding system could be attached to the facade while on the go, and as long as it stabilizes in somewhere in the countryside, one story can be built on top. The whole project was designed to be constructed on site with volunteer, low tech, simple. In my opinion, activating the knowledge of the countryside, you know, the wisdom of the countryside. Here you see another picture of the model presented at the exhibition. And here there is a small, but for me another important point. I thought to myself, in this little, small, humble architecture in the middle of nowhere, there is something extremely delicate that is happening. Someone wants to report mafia and legal activities, and there is somebody else, a lawyer, a volunteer, who's risking his life to initiate a legal procedure. It's a simple question. Where do they sit? Do they sit in an IKEA chair again? And the whole project was about doing it yourself, building outside. So I designed something, a very simple chair that is made with a profile that you can buy at any hobby. But I call it the sedia libera, the free chair, with the idea that freedom, you have to build it yourself with your bare hands, on the spot, and somehow reveal the poeticness of the most humble human activity, sit and talk. and trying to find or depict the most humble chair that you can only produce it on the spot. It is not a product that you can buy, because you have to make it yourself. And this is a sketch of where I imagine this pavilion, this mobile pavilion, to be. Again, trying to evoke the dramaticness and the poeticness of the Mediterranean agricultural landscape. Thesis number 10, manifest. So now I would like to summarize what I've been talking so far. And I started pointing the fact, and not the idea, that in the next 35 years, the same amount of people who lived in the entire world in 1935, which is the moment in which my father was born, will move into city. So we need to create a home out of this fact. This is not an idea, it's a fact, it's happening. It's happening now. And then I challenge you, saying that I consider design as a form of knowledge, producing narratives and devices. Then I show you a few examples. Then I started to present my 10 theses. So the first one, be political, and I show you how we should look upon the world from the point of view of the individuals, from the point of view of people. Then I show you how we can activate objects, exhausted objects, or waste, or industrial waste, and activate them to make new things out of it, create new meanings. And this was the case of the free market. Then I show you how we can grow a meal a day in a normal modern apartment, again, with simple means. Then I show you how we can fuck consumerism. Then I also show you how we should hack the system and not the product. We should aim at hacking a bigger infrastructure with narrative. I show you how we can activate the city and how we can farm the city, applying agricultural knowledge to city planning. Last few points, Somnia et Libera, in which I show you how we can actually create temporary, we can activate interior spaces and make the possibility to dwell in abandoned spaces, factory or warehouses. Then I show you a small project that there is an architecture challenging the off-grid technology to create a new architectural language, possibly, potentially. Off-grid yourself. The last statement that I made is manifest, reminding ourselves that every project we do is a statement. And this, I would like to consider these 10 statements my manifesto of the future of how to make ourselves at home. And I would like to conclude this talk saying that I do believe that in design there is no rules. There is only one single law. Enjoy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Antonio. I hope you enjoyed your presentation. Did you?
I did. I love it.
Ah, good, good. I'm happy then. So we have understood that what you showed us now is like an idea of a society. Actually, that's what you're explaining to people. And you use products, you use existing things, and you transform them to activate the whole potentials around it. That's how we should take it, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what are the next projects you're working on for our future at home?
I'm keep going with the one I'm busy with, and I'm privately I'm collecting all resilient techniques, but this is kind of like a hobby. I don't collect books. I collect pieces of knowledge.
Okay.
But recently I've been looking into mud construction, how to build structure of. But this is an interest of mine that hopefully might turn into something. So this is what I'm busy with. So we'll see you next year, and you'll show us what you're working on. Hopefully. All right. Thank you very much, Antonio. Thank you very much.